on Jesus, all things are possible. I can mount on wings like eagles and soar. When I call on Jesus, mountains are gonna fall. 'Cause he'll move heaven and earth to come rescue me when I call.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. It is another It Is Possibly Tuesdays with Sanya, and I have a wonderful guest that I'd like you to meet and listen to and be inspired by. I want us to start our usual way, which is, for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans for prosperity and not for disaster, to give you a future and a hope. But Jesus beheld them and said unto them, with men this is impossible, but with God all things are possible. Welcome to another It Is Possible Tuesdays with Sanya, and we're in 2025. Ladies and gentlemen, we are here to thrive. We're not just surviving, we have arrived and we're going to live. We're not just going to exist. This is your year. So, without further chatter, I'd like to introduce you to my guest. But I'm not going to tell you her name. I'm going to allow her to tell you her name, tell you where she was born, and if she knows the meaning of her name, she's going to share that with us. Welcome.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's lovely. And yeah, I'll just start with my name. My name is Besma, and I was born and raised in the Netherlands, kind of countryside, village life, everything shuts at 6, nothing's open on a Sunday. Very kind of rural environment. And my name, according to my parents, it's Arabic, so it just means essentially a smile, dimple smile, which I have a dimple, so that kind of fits in really nicely. And yeah, I'm really happy to be on here. It's
Well,
great.
lovely. Thank you ever so much. And I'm happy you told me that you were born in the Netherlands. I've visited the Netherlands and I enjoyed it. It was not in the cold, it was in a good weather that I can appreciate, not not the weather we're presently having. Um, and tell me a little bit about school in the Netherlands.
Yeah, it's very different to the UK. It's education is essentially separated depending on your academic ability. There's a lot of vocational studies you do as well as purely academic. So from the age of 12 years old, you essentially do an exam, and from there they decide where you go off to. If you're best suited for vocational trade school, you go off there. If you have the academics ability, you go to an academic school where that will allow you to learn the subjects in order to go to university and become a doctor or an engineer or something along those lines. But in that entire system, you've got an education system for those with disabilities. So I am deaf and I have been since the age of since birth, but it didn't get picked up until I was 3 years old. And with that system, I went to special educational school in the Netherlands, which was fun. I mean, I did it up until the age of 9, and then I moved to the UK. And obviously, when I joined here, the education system said I didn't need to go to special education school, so I went into mainstream. Primary, mainstream, secondary with a resource provision attached to it for deaf students. And that's kind of my secondary education up until I went off to university.
Right, interesting. I was aware of the two-tiered system in the Netherlands because when I went there, we weren't actually as teachers on international professional development, and we were quite interested in the tiered system. We didn't get to visit a school with disability, but it's interesting that you went to school for disability. Now, you said you're deaf, but for most people, if you're deaf, your speech, you're speaking.
Yeah.
How did that happen? So explain to me the fact that you've been deaf from birth, it got picked up when you were 3, and then you were sent to a school for disability.
Yeah.
But you are a person who is deaf with speech and with very clear speech. What was, how did that happen?
Yeah, I mean, from my earliest memories, the school, there was a lot of emphasis on speech and language therapy.
Mhm.
I think from an early age, I always remember going in a group with other kids, and these were kids with, a wide range of disabilities. I mean, I don't know what it is because I
What
don't
is it?
remember it. But there were, we had other kids that were hearing aids, some had cochlear, some had neurodiversity. So the whole bunch, it was physical disability as well. So I just remember a lot of speech and language therapy at that early age with groups and on my own. And also my mother spent a lot of time encouraging me to speak and model language. She didn't want me to essentially learn sign language. She felt, I think it was the times really. She felt that if I had learned sign language, then I would not become an oral speaker when in
Mhm.
reality that's not how it works, obviously.
Yes, yes.
But it was just a lot of kind of speaking, and also when it comes to deafness, there's something called a hearing age, I believe, which obviously the younger you are when you have your hearing kind of access to your hearing, the better your speech becomes essentially because you kind of hear the sound. So the younger you are, the better. And I think thankfully my mother really pushed for that. And the second they picked up, she's deaf, she needs to wear hearing aids. She was, straight on it. You wear your hearing aids every single day. Doesn't matter if you don't like them. She was very on top of it, really. I think that
Yeah.
early knowledge and kind of listening to the professionals at the end of the day helped massively.
Yeah, yes, yes. So, without being intrusive, do you still wear hearing aids? Or do you have, you do? But they're quite discreet.
Yeah, I mean the hair helps.
Yes, yes,
I've got
yes,
long hair. I've always but yeah, no, they're
yes,
tiny. They're like that. So
yes,
they're much
yes.
more even if I put my hair up, you won't be able
You
to
want
see
to be able to
them.
see them. Yes,
Most people forget that I'm deaf.
that's
It's just
yes,
something they just forget, and then it's always funny when I have to remind them because they just go, "Oh my God!" I just so it's yeah, it's a bit of a double-edged sword. I think people just
yes.
forget sometimes, and that leads to funny and interesting situations.
And I can imagine. Um, Besme, do you do any lip reading? Is that a part of how you manage your deafness? And is it okay for me to say deafness to you?
Yeah, no, I'm lip for it obviously a lot more consciously than I think a hearing person does. And yeah, calling me deaf is kind of something I've learned to accept about myself. I think obviously in the teenage years it's I didn't want that word associated. It,
Yeah,
it felt so powerful and so, encompassing when I just felt like, no, I'm not deaf, I can hear.
yeah,
But then so I think the older I got, the more I just thought it's not an ugly word. It's just a word, and I think you just need to give it less power over you.
yeah,
Yeah, I'm fine with it, honestly.
yeah. And has it impacted you negatively that you have not learned sign language?
In that regard, yes. And I think because of the circumstances, I've not really been able to get involved in the deaf community. I didn't even know that. To this day, I don't have that.
A deaf, yes.
In a weird way, I was the only student for a couple of years in my secondary school who was the only deaf student. And it was obviously when I got a bit older, some other students joined, but because of the age gap, I didn't really interact with them.
Interact with them, yes.
Even as an
Wow.
adult, it's not, I don't really have any friends who are that. Like it's not something
Conscious,
yeah, there's no community. And I think it does annoy me when I wished I learned sign language because I think
yes,
when I get older, my hearing is going to decrease just naturally,
yeah.
uh, like everybody else. So it is kind of a bit like, oh, I wished I had the chance, but I don't know what would have happened.
Different, yeah. But it's interesting. Your parents were um, adamant that you should have no barriers presented to you, and they wanted you to have as much control as possible and as many opportunities as possible. And the speech and language therapy in the Netherlands, and then you're coming to the UK at the age of 9, opening a totally different environment for you where you were no longer in a special school. You were recognized as someone who could manage the academic, you were just not able to hear without the technology. And you did very well. Now, you said you went on to university. What did you study at university and why?
Yeah, I wanted to, well, I think this was what, back 2017 or something. So I think obviously family, everybody goes to university, and I wanted to go to university, just felt like an exciting next step. I went and studied psychology
Ah,
for 3 years, which I really enjoyed, and then enjoyed it so much I decided to do a master's. Um, but I did that in forensic psychology. So I wanted to do something that was very different and something very interesting. And I think honestly, I up until that point, I've kind of always been told by teachers and friends and family that I should become a teacher of the deaf and go into teaching. And I, to be honest, I kind of always felt no. I
yeah.
just never had that appetite for it. And I always felt like why? Is it because I'm deaf? Like I just felt like that shouldn't be the sole reason to all of my teachers for deaf were hearing people and they were amazing and
Listen.
they might not understand exactly what I was going through, but they were just had a lot of compassion and empathy. Ironically, the ones that were deaf weren't that good.
Oh,
But it's that shouldn't be the reason to go
yes,
into that. So I think
yes,
that's
yes.
why I pivoted towards something completely different, as forensic psychology, and I don't think it's a field that I know lots of deaf people go into. It's not something I've even
Mhm.
looked at, so if I'm wrong, obviously correct me. But I just kind of went the complete opposite and just wanted to go into an industry that had nothing to do with it.
Yes.
In response to kind of years of people telling me that.
Yeah, yeah. So in a way we could say you are a bit of a rebel.
So, I mean, yeah, maybe a little bit. I wouldn't call myself that, but yes.
Yeah, you decided you can't buttonhole me. You can't
Yeah.
tell me what I should do. I do have a mind of my own and I'm going to exercise it and quite independently. So, tell me a little bit about forensic psychology. What is involved in that? Sounds like it has to do with the criminal side of things.
Yeah,
Does
no,
it?
I don't work in anymore. They've left it. But it essentially is the study of why offenders commit crimes and why they do it again and again, and what are the risk factors. And when someone's up for parole, what do we do around that? And how do we safeguard the community as well as the individual themselves? There's a lot of kind of testimony involved. So you obviously go to court and you kind of give your evidence if someone has a psychological profile around them. So it's very fascinating, and very sad. I think
Yes,
you
yes.
end up hearing lots of stories about people who just get lost in the system and you just kind of wonder, how broken it is. Even now, it's
Mhm,
not, and it
mhm.
doesn't seem to be getting better, unfortunately.
Yeah, yeah. So you would have met on many situations in which trauma played a factor in what happened to a child and how they behaved. Wow.
Massively. And I managed to see that firsthand when working at school because I was studying full time and working in a school. And I remember seeing a child little year seven boy, who came from a very chaotic household. I mean, you can just tell from no respect for authority, always fighting. He was just kind of the troubled boy in
Yeah.
the school. And I remember once looking at him and going, oh my God, if someone doesn't step in with proper help and guidance, he's going to, God forbid, end up like those who end up in going to prison. And so I just saw that direct link for the first time so clearly. And I think it just happens that I was studying it and working it at the same time.
Yeah.
Was something really shocking. It's
Shocking.
all
Yes.
life.
And what made you pivot from working with this area that of excitement and interest to you that you chose, and you're now in a different area? Tell us a little bit about the switch and a little bit about what you're doing now.
Yeah, so I switched because I felt like I had so much knowledge when it comes to supporting young people in education, transition, and entering the workplace. And my passion did lie with supporting SEND students. It really did. I think as someone who went through the system and experienced that from essentially 9 up until 18 before I went to university, I really felt like I had something to give back.
Mhm.
Whereas in the forensics community, I enjoyed it so much, but I just felt like I didn't have anything to give. I've not been involved. I don't come from that much trauma, like it
Yeah.
comparatively.
Yeah.
And I did have one interesting incident where I went and visited a unit as part of my degree, obviously, and I brought my Roger pen because I had it for university. And I brought it in and I popped it on the table, and they were having group therapy. And one of the offenders just happened to be walking in and saw it, and he got very angry. I was like, "What is this? Are you recording the session?" And I explained, "No, it's for me. I'm deaf. It's just something that I could use to hear better." And he calmed down. But about 5 minutes later, they everybody got into an argument. And people just started screaming at each other, and it was a very chaotic, moment. There were obviously, the clinicians were there and everything, but I just remember one of the guys who initially was like, "What is this item?" Started screaming at another one who was like, "Well, don't scream at her because she's deaf." And I just laughed to myself and said, "Oh, get me out of here." But I just felt like I had this extra vulnerability that I just didn't want to have
Where
at that moment. And I just thought, you know what, I love this theoretically. I don't think I want to do it because I just felt so much more vulnerable. And then finding out that the offender had horribly abused their deaf child. Didn't help in that I'm laughing, but I shouldn't be. But it's just seeing all of that happen at once. I was like, oh, I'm gonna leave. So
yeah.
that's kind of what was happening in my mind around that time.
Wow. Quite terrifying for you being
Yeah.
placed in such a vulnerable position, quite feeling quite exposed. Um,
Yeah.
And it's interesting that the pivot that you've pivoted has placed you a little bit back in the environment that you didn't really want to be in terms
Yeah.
of working with young people, rather working in education. You didn't want to
Yeah.
be a teacher of the deaf, but now you are working with young people with special educational needs and disability, helping them to transition into the world of work. Tell
Yeah.
us a little bit about that.
Yeah, and well, I manage a program called Access Interns, which is essentially all about providing corporate internship to post 16 year 13 students, getting them into corporate internships and getting them to experience 4 weeks over the summer, just really grounded, bespoke experience in the industry they're interested in. And obviously, having an open conversation about their disability and what type of reasonable adjustments they need, and just educating them on their rights and that they shouldn't feel burdened to have these conversations. So it's really just about giving them that opportunity because I think when I think back to my time doing a lot of work experience, there was a lot of stuff being done in social mobility for ethnicity, for women. There was, thankfully we've moved. There's a lot more to do, but I think there's a lot of progress already made. Whereas with disability, it always seemed like a sector that people were just really scared to do, and just wasn't a lot of kind of progress being made, even especially when you look at the city life, when you think of big corporate organization and trading and banking and all those, it's shocking how, I think I saw stats in law itself that only 6% of lawyers identify having disability,
Disability.
which
Mhm.
if you think about law and all the kind of advancement they've made, not enough, I think. But it's just so shocking. It shows you that's so much work to do, and it needs to be
Yeah.
done by the right people who understand it, I think.
Those who have had the experience, it's better coming from them. And therefore, you are now opening a new door of opportunity for persons with SEND. And is this a new program then? it's a fairly new program. So you're a pioneer, um, paving the
I
way
wouldn't
for
call
others.
myself that. But yeah, it's a new program. I think other programs that follow a similar model are geared towards university students. But
Yeah.
that in itself, you're losing massive amount of students. I think only what 15% of universities have a disability.
Activity,
But
yes.
yeah, so that's like, what about the rest?
Yes, yes,
I
yes.
think it's just, and also I think what I found from my own experience, what I didn't think banking or I don't know, um m- protocol, like all these kind of big financial things, like I didn't think they even existed in my mind. Like I thought it was
Yes,
doctor of psychology, that's the only thing. So I think even the awareness of these types of job aren't accessible to kids like me at the
completely.
time. I didn't. So I think it's also about educating that and
It,
giving them the confidence from an early age to aspire you want to go work in a bank? Great. You don't just have to be, the person at the end of the counter. There's so much more you could do.
it,
It's just
yes,
about explaining it and just letting them know.
yes. I'm liking that because quite a number of students with SEND end up doing different types of jobs. So they're into trade, they're into construction, they're into hairdressing, they're into um, other jobs which are more visible, where there's a greater representation. And representation does matter because if you've never known that there has been a deaf lawyer or a
Yeah.
blind lawyer, or you will never ever think that you can do it. And therefore, the organization that you're presently working with and the role that you presently have is ensuring that young people can um, look elsewhere, think outside of the box, and give themselves new opportunities. So, well done in being that new cog in the wheel for the persons with SEND. I want to go back a little and have a talk more about you as an individual. So you grew up in the Netherlands up to the age of 9, and then you came here. What is life like in the Netherlands, just in general?
Well, I think it depends if you go in a big city. I grew up in a tiny village, so for me it was very life always felt a lot calmer and a lot slower. I think things just take a really easy pace, and I think for me as a child, there was so much freedom. I would get on a bike, say bye to my mum and dad, and just ride off. And then the only rule I had was be back before sundown. And if there's a white van and he's offering like candy, don't get in it. Like that was the only rules I had, and I would go off and and I think the culture there is so different where, as a child, if you're entering different businesses, they don't care. They're a child as a child. I would enter a horse training facility, which I don't think was accessible for the public because I think it was a private one. But I think for them, when they see kids just opening the door and coming in and looking at the horses, they were like, there's nothing wrong with that. So I think there's a lot of freedom as a child, and I think I really appreciated it. And just nature in general, which I really love. Whereas London is kind of chaotic and kind of constant, and I'm always happy to go back.
Yes. Okay. And do you visit, do you go back home quite often?
Yeah, no, I do. Oh, I thought I put my phone on silent. I apologize for that. But no, I try to go back twice a year.
Oh, lovely.
So I'm very, we still got the same house that I grew up in. So I'm always very keen to go back and just see how
Reconnect.
you connect and to just kind of also just to take a break from London a little bit. I
Yes,
think
yes.
that's really important.
Yes, it's always good to reconnect and go back to your roots, get that bit of viv and vam and come back ready to tackle the energy, the different energy of London. Now, are you an only child or do you have siblings?
No, so I'm the youngest. I've got two siblings, but I kind of grew up as an only child just because of our age difference. So between me and my sister's about 15 years, and me and my brother about 13. So they were teenagers when I was been when I was born, so they had no interest in me, obviously. So I kind of grew up as an only child.
Yeah.
That was quite fun.
Yeah. And I gather that you were quite independent as well.
Yeah, I would say so. I think it's because of the educational system over there. It is very independent. It's, you're kind of expected to do everything yourself, and I think you're not babied, and I think
Yeah.
you could see that between me and my siblings, even though it's a generational gap between us, but they were raised in a different kind of circumstances and a different educational system. I think my parents, because they were kind of new to the country, they didn't know the Dutch culture, but they kind of saw parts of it that were really good and helpful, and this real push for independence on young kids that they kind of allowed me to naturally kind of go through that and observe a lot of the culture and pick up. From every culture, there's great things about it, and we have to pick them up because it's wonderful. Why not? I think they were really good at allowing that to happen and not being so scared of a different culture and thinking that that's a bad thing inherently.
Yeah. Yeah. So you've said your parents, you were born in the Netherlands. Are your parents from the Netherlands or are they from another country?
Yeah, so my parents were born in Iraq, and then just after I think the Iranian war, some war happened in the late 80s. They left and went to the Netherlands.
And why the Netherlands? Why not the UK? Why not Canada? Why not the US?
Yeah, I think it was my dad had a brother here, so it
Oh,
was just kind of it just worked a bit nicer. I'm
yeah.
kind of glad we went to the Netherlands. I think I had a very difficult birthing process, and I think not very pleasant. And I think as a result of lots of kind of complications from kind of birth and everything, I hence why I'm deaf now. So I'm really happy we did go to the Netherlands because they had the technology and the resources and kind of the medical
It's knowledge.
experience. Just essentially saved my life. I think without
Yeah,
that, I wouldn't be
yeah.
sitting here right now.
Oh, and I am happy that you, having gone through that, are here with us to share with us your story. Um, so, and at this point, what's the relationship with your siblings like? Is that closer, or is the great generational gap still there?
No, it is a lot closer. I think when I was a teenager and an early child, it wasn't there because, they were just teens and in their early 20s, so they weren't interested in me.
Yeah.
I wasn't interested in them either. But I think now that I'm in my mid 20s, that, they've settled down, they've got kids. So I think now our relationship is really strong and
Mm,
solid. Because I
lovely.
think we just realized that we're kind of more on the same level now.
Yeah, yeah. And family is so important. And every family goes through these different stages of, oh, you're the little baby. No, we don't want to have time with you. And now you're an adult. We can see things differently and we can definitely gel closer and the familial bond is stronger. Now, you live in London, and what changes would you say you've seen that had impacted on you as a person with a disability that you think that's good, that's bad?
Oh, that's a good question. Um, I think what's changed is there's a lot more. Um, I think there needs to be more awareness. I think
Mm,
we've really tried, but it's still not there, especially when you're looking at public facing services. I had a incident where I wanted to have my freedom pass, and I wanted to obviously get on the train, and then I had the card reader malfunction, so it thought I had entered, so it wouldn't let
without,
me enter again, which happened. It's not an issue. I went to the staff and I said, "Hey, got my freedom pass. This is what's happened." And he looked at me, he goes, Why do you have that?" And I was like, "Well, I'm deaf." And he goes, "Well, but you're speaking." and you're wearing headphones. And I was like, yeah, deafness is not just one thing, it's a very, diverse need. And he just wouldn't let me on the train. He was like, no, you need to pay for a full ticket. And I was running late for work, and I thought, so I think it was those moments that I think can really demotivate someone or just remind someone, oh, I have to explain it all again. And even if you do explain it, some people won't believe you.
Accept,
And
yes, yes,
I think there needs to be a lot more public awareness on the diversity of disability
yes,
in general, because I think people still to this day, and I still see it at work, when they think of disability, they just think someone in a wheelchair. That's their
yeah.
mind goes
Very divisible.
very visible, and they just forget, or they don't place enough emphasis on the other forms of it. I mean, I can't tell the number of times people just forget. I mean, even my own colleagues who are, disability aware, even they forget. So I think there
Yeah,
needs to be so
yeah,
much more work done. And just
yeah,
I think maybe at an earlier age where I think I'm an advocate for having mixed education where it's not just you don't send all the kids to a special needs school, because yes, it's important if they're able to access the learning and that's a better suited environment for them. But kids that can cope need to be integrated and mixed because they learn what a hearing aid looks like. I mean, all the kids that I grew up with, they know what a radio aid looks like.
yeah,
They've seen someone change their battery in the middle of a lesson. They've they see these things. They've seen BSL. They've
mhm,
seen, I didn't use it, but we had other kids that were using it. So it's that exposure that needs to happen at an earlier age, I think, to solve that problem when we
yes,
get older. But yeah, I think that's the first thing that comes to my mind.
yeah. Exposure, awareness, experience, they do make a very profound impact on others. And you've said, the fact that you said people have seen you change your battery for your hearing aid, they've seen your radio, they've seen people using BSL. They won't all go, oh, what's happening? It won't be
Yeah,
strange to them because these are people that we interact with every day. They don't have two heads. They're just like you, you know.
exactly.
They are similar but different. And if we are all placed in the environment where we see people who are different from us, but they're similar to us, there'll be less angst, there'll be
Yeah.
less anxiety, there'll be
Yeah.
less ignorance in the way they interact with us. And I think that's the reason why I asked you that question before, you say you're deaf, but you're speaking and your speech is so clear. How is that so? Because there will be people who will look at you and go, you're not deaf. Because
Yeah.
you're speaking. How can a deaf person speak? Because that's all they've been exposed to. If you're deaf, you have no speech. And if
Yeah.
you speak, your speech is not clear.
Yeah.
And so for many people, you will be an anomaly.
Yeah.
You'll be, no, no, this doesn't happen. And I'm so happy that you explained to my audience, but also that you've explained about the difficulty you've had with that incident with
Yeah.
transport.
Yeah, no,
And
I mean, I think I've had moments where I've explained to someone I'm deaf. Like, I'm really sorry, I didn't quite hear you. There's lots of background noise, and they go, "What?" I was like, "Well, I'm deaf," and then they don't believe me. And I think once the lady got very angry at me, thinking I was, you know, you know,
being,
being rude and just making a muck about it. And I was so fed up because this had been like the third person who'd done this to me, and I just ripped out my hearing aid and just went, here, I am deaf. And I think she just looked at me like, oh my God, I'm really sorry, and apologized. But it was
yeah,
just like, no one is gonna say that for the fun
yes,
of it. I
yes,
mean,
yes,
maybe one person, but no one's gonna say that just to have a laugh. So I think it was just like, but I'm happy I did that. It was a bit extreme.
yes,
I think
yes,
I'm
yes,
gonna put her in her place where it's
yes,
like, no, you just need to not do that.
yes. And it really brings home the fact that as much as we speak about disability awareness and we have disability days and we have months for disability in the UK, and we are quite advanced in the UK, there are pockets of ignorance everywhere, and there has to be a stronger drive
Yes.
for awareness and information to be shared with the various areas of the community so that we don't
Yeah.
have situations where you are made to feel uncomfortable, you are frustrated, and you have to do something extreme, you know?
Yeah, I think it just so, I mean, again, I saw firsthand working in a school. I mean, there were lots of parents that, your child has global
Learning,
learning
developmental delay. Yeah.
and they would be like, well, but he can write. Well, yes, he could write. Yes, but he's not writing at the same level as his peers. But he like it is always just like
They don't want to accept.
you just don't want to accept it. And I think for me, I just felt like, is it a pride thing? Is it you just don't want your child to have that label or to have access to that because it hurts you? And I would always sit there going, you are so selfish and you are just doing this for you and you don't put that child's need first, which is to have access to education that's suitable for him. And it's just, yeah, there's so much more that needs to be done, I think. And I saw it firsthand in a school. I mean, we rarely had a parent who just got it and just said, yes, accepted it and moved
Oh,
on and worked
God.
with us. Often there
Yeah.
was always something going on. There's always something pushing back at you.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it is selfish on the part of the parent. We know what is the issue, the concern, the need that your child has, and this is how we can support your child. But you would prefer that your child stumbles around because you don't want to accept that your child has a need because in your eyes it looks badly on you. And
Oh,
your child is here, your child is an individual. You need to do everything for your child's benefit. So
yeah.
it's quite profound what you've just said.
It
Um,
breaks my heart because it's like, why would you do that? Just why? It's just you just yeah, I could talk about this all day, but it was just frustrating at the end. You just kind of want to shake them and go, what's wrong with
wrong
you?
with you. Yes, yes.
Because it was just, I remember one parent, I was like, if you don't let your child go and transition into a special educational school because we cannot cope with it, we can't meet his
Meet the
needs,
needs
he will do his GCSE. He won't get any GCSEs because he just is not capable of doing
uh,
it without that
at the
support.
time. Yeah.
So he's going to leave school with no qualification. But if you at least send him to special educational needs school, he would leave with qualification. He will leave with
Yeah.
life skills. They will teach him about the world. And the
Yeah.
parents like, no. And you just, as schools and teachers, you can't do anything. You just have to
Because the parent's voice
it's
is
there. And but then that child suffers at the end of it, and then they get older, and yeah, it's a vicious cycle that I think starts from a point of just selfishness. And they don't see it, and I think they feel it years down the line when
yes,
it's too late sometimes.
yes. Yeah. I am so happy that you are an advocate for people with disability in terms of here are doors that they need to enter through. Parents work with us, and if there are more of us doing that, then the world will become more inclusive and the young people will be integrated, because the environment will be accommodating to them. We will be working the environment so that they are inside rather than on the periphery, because everybody has a part to play and everybody has a place in the society. Um, what would you say is your dream for
Oh,
young people with who have disability?
my dream. I think my dream is for them not to have to explain themselves.
Hmm.
Just the constant hassle of always having to explain, always have to justify your reasons. I mean, it's just I log off work a bit earlier than my colleagues just because I know that I feel a lot tired just simply because my brain takes a lot more time to process information and to listen. And so it's just always having to feel like you're a burden. I think I just wish that my dream would be for us to not feel that way, for it just to be, it's fine. You don't have to justify every little action you do. I think because that takes up a lot of energy and just mental
Yeah.
health just in general. So I really hope
Yeah.
that would change one day.
Yes. And you'd have my vote. You
Oh,
know,
thank you.
um, are there are there organizations other than yours in London, or is it only based in London? Do you have pockets of your organization elsewhere in the country doing the same work? Or is that a vision of your organization to develop and expand in other areas of the country?
Yeah, no, so Variety, we're a nationwide charity, so we are up and down the country. However, the program I manage, Access Hinton, it's been solely London based. Um,
Oh,
the aim is obviously to grow it and have a national presence because there's young people everywhere in the country that need to be placed and employers that want to place them, but we've just been focusing on London region.
London.
It just everybody's in London. It's easier just to kind of everybody's headquarters are in London. So it's easier just to kind of start small and then go
Expand.
big because I think because my aim with this program, and this is the one thing I always say to, they're not kids, they're 18. But
Yes.
young people I speak to, my priority is that you are safe and happy and that this experience is something you want because that's all I care about. I think because that's so important. If they have one bad experience, that stays with them for the rest of their lives. And I don't want that. I don't want to ever have that. So I always place them at the center of everything I do. Uh, and I hope they feel that way and they kind of feel supported and guided because I always see it. Some of these young people have been in the same, some of them have been in the same environment for 7 years, if you think about it. Year
Yes.
seven to end of GCSE and add A levels on top of that, 7 years. So there is an extra level of vulnerability, and I think the corporate world, yes, has moved on, but unfortunately, there are still incidences where the wrong people just do not great things. They just kind of muck
Mhm.
about. So I'm very on top of it and making sure that doesn't happen and that we have the right safeguarding in place to protect them. Even though they are 18, they're not,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
doesn't mean anything to me. You need to protect them, just like
All
anyone
the
else.
time. Yes, it's interesting and very important that people recognize the importance of safeguarding,
Yes,
the importance of putting things in place to protect not just those who have disability, but everybody. But in this case, those who have an extra layer of vulnerability, as you've
yes.
pointed out. Which um, which areas or industries do you find are more receptive to the work that you are interested in doing with young people with SEND?
Yeah, I would say we've had a really good success with the property and infrastructure. They've been really keen on and on board, and they've embraced the program, and they put their money where their mouth is. I think I'll say it that. They are very, they, from my experience with the organization I've worked with, they've always kind of been really passionate about it. And I've always found that the ones that have someone at the top that understands this industry, they might themselves have a disability, either acquired or just from birth or they
Mhm.
have someone in their immediate close family that like a son or a cousin or someone or something. I think that's where I see the impact with organizations that don't have that or that person is a bit more less senior. You get caught up in all the kind of red tape of it and things need to be justified and sometimes you just feel like all they're doing is ticking a box their
Yes.
inclusion and diversity, and they're not really interested in implementing actual change. And those organizations are pretty easy for me to spot because you can just
Mhm.
tell from the way they talk about disability and the way they think about it. It's all numbers to them, and I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, no, it's not because there's a person attached to that number, and it's so important because if you want to change something, you got to do it from within, but also you got to do it with the right intention, because otherwise, it's just going to collapse on itself.
Yeah. Yes. Besme, you are a breath of fresh air, and
Oh, thank you.
it's been a pleasure listening to you and your passion, your commitment to, making this not just a box ticking exercise, but a way of life. Because persons with disabilities, they're not going anywhere. They're a
No,
part of the fabric of the society and they need to be accommodated. And we need to be more aware and more sympathetic, more empathetic, more involved in a real sense, so that people don't feel burdened and frustrated and feel as if they're just something for people to just get rid of. The same way we want to be considered, we want everybody else to be considered like that. So thank you very much for your advocacy. Thank you very much for
no,
your
thank you for letting me come on here. Honestly, no, thank you.
it has been a blessing, and I know my listeners are thinking, wow, I do like listening to this young lady. She
Oh,
voice, out there, and we need to do our part to support her and make everyone in our community aware that we can be more helpful than we presently are. I want to ask you as we wrap up our little chat, and I've enjoyed our little chat today. So
I've
thank you.
loved it.
Find out what is it that confirms for you that it is possible.
Um, I think for me, what confirms it's possible is where we are now in the world. I think that means that if you look back 50 years ago or even 10 years ago, the things that we've achieved weren't even possible. So I think the fact that things are moving every year and every time and every day, things are getting better. It shows me it is possible. It just means that it's a very long journey, but we'll get there eventually. And hopefully, the more people we rally up and encourage and educate, the faster we move. But I think it is possible because we are moving. Things are happening. So yeah, that makes me feel kind of very optimistic about everything in the world.
You spoke about the fact that where you are now is both a happy moment, but it's also the moment that tells you that things are possible
Yeah.
because you are seeing movement. And the fact that we're not stagnant is so good. It's augurs well for the future. And it says we have come a long way. We're not ready to stop because there's more to be done.
Yes.
Besme, thank you ever so much for spending this time with me and my audience on another It Is Possible Tuesdays with Sanya. We have been blessed and we've been inspired and we have been motivated and excited by
Oh,
what
thank
you have
you.
been doing and what you're dreaming of doing. So thank you very much. We
Mm.
have been really, really happy to have spent this time with you. And so as we end, I'd just like to remind everybody, first of all, I want to say thank you to everybody for coming and thank you to our very special guest. You know, it's it is another It Is Possible Tuesdays with Sanya. And for my community, I want you to remember, be a dreamer, a doer, a thinker. See possibility everywhere. Because you are alive, everything is possible. But Jesus beheld them and said unto them, with men this is impossible, but with God all things are possible. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, everyone, listen up. I see you in 2 weeks' time. Thank you for being here with us today. Bye bye.
Bye.
When I call on Jesus, all things are possible. I can mount on wings like eagles and soar. When I call on Jesus, mountains are gonna fall. 'Cause he'll move heaven and earth to come